In this section, we will work on the front walls of the house, and for that, out of the chipboard, we need our front base, back and top. That's these two pieces here, and then the front walls, which are H, I, and J. And we'll also need decorative paper for J, the walls, H, I, and J. So I've got those pieces out, and then from the templates, we need the template that's labeled front and back base, the one that's labeled door openings that has side I, and window openings, one of two, which has side J on it. Now I should say that you only need to cut the openings for the windows and doors and the openings in the base here if you're going to have lights in the house. If you're not going to have lights, you don't need to cut any of these openings. So let's get started. We'll start by cutting our shape here for the front base and top, and to do this, our template says to measure down 2 5/8 on the right edge and connect that point with that top corner point and cut off that diagonal. So I'll do that for both of these pieces. So I have those angles cut on both of these pieces, and then on one it says only one with hole. I'm going to have lights, so I'm going to do this measuring here and cut out this red rectangle. So following these measurements here, so it's a 1/2 inch by 1 1/2 inch hole. It comes in 1 3/8 from the long side and 1 1/2 inches up from the bottom. So I'll get that hole cut next. So I've cut the hole in my in one piece here. You can see it matches up with the drawing. I'm going to just set that piece aside for now because that is the top, and we're going to work on the base. And what we want to do next as a prep on this base is to add our joining strips all around the edges. Now I make these out of cardstock that I've cut 3/4 of an inch wide, and I've scored down the middle and then added 3/8 inch, 1/4 inch score tape on either side on the outside bend of this. So I'm just going to cut some pieces and put them all around the edges here. So here's my piece with the joining strips all around all 4 edges, and I may not remember to say as we go along, but anytime we attach anything, you'll of course want to burnish it down with your bone folder. So now we can set this piece aside for a moment. Now I have wall H here, and what we want to do with wall H is to mark a center point on the top and then measure down 1 1/8 inches, 1 1/8 on either side, and then connect those diagonals to make a pointed little roof up here at the top. So center point, 1 1/8 on each side. So here's wall H with its little roof cut out, and we can set that piece aside. And then we can work on wall I. For the openings on wall I, we have 2 of them, and they are 1 5/16 inch in from the left, and then they are 2 1/8 inch square, which leaves us with 1 7/16 inch over here on the right. So I'll draw a line at 1 5/16 and then 2 1/8 away from that, and I'll just check that that's 1 7/16. So I've drawn those 2 vertical lines, and I keep my piece oriented on my gridded mat here, which helps me check all of my measurements. And then for the lower opening, the measurements are given on this left side, so it's 1 inch and 1/16 to the bottom edge, and then 3 3/16 to the top edge. And then for the top opening, they're on the right side, and it's 4 3/4 to the bottom edge and 6 7/8 to the top edge, which will give us our 2 1/8 inch opening. So I'll draw those 4 lines and then cut the openings. So here is wall I with its openings, and since this distance on the left is different from the distance on the right, I'm going to write front on here so that I don't flip it over by mistake and get it oriented incorrectly. So there is wall I with its openings. Now for the openings on wall J, I will use this template that's on the right here, and we'll measure in 5/8 of an inch from the right side, and then an additional 3/4 of an inch, because these openings are 3/4 of an inch wide. So I'll make those 2 markings. And then these openings are 1 5/8 inch tall, so the measurements for the lower window are here, and they are 1 9/16 up to the bottom, and then 3 3/16 up to the top, which should give us our 1 5/8 inch opening. And then for the upper window, they're over here on the side, and that is at 5 1/4 for the bottom and 6 7/8 for the top. So I'll measure those and then cut those openings. So here is wall J with its 2 openings cut. Now we're going to prep some decorative paper for our wall sections, and because I'm using this paper pad that is only 8 inches tall, for wall H I have to make a join. Now if you're using paper that's 12 inches tall, obviously you won't have a join, but if there is the need for a join, we make it at 4 1/4 inches up from the bottom. 4 1/4, because that can be hidden. So I'm going, for piece H, I'm going to use this paper and cut 2 strips that are 2 1/8. And again, if you're using 12-inch paper, you just cut one that's 2 1/8. And then I'll make my join at 4 1/4, and then I'll be back. So here is the piece I have cut to go on wall H, and my join down here is 4 1/4 from the bottom. I'm just going to temporarily adhere it to wall H. And when I temporarily adhere it, I'm going to align it with the bottom and then center it left and right. I should have about a 1/16 of an inch reveal going up the side here. And I just have chosen to do that black reveal for my pieces. If you want to figure out how to wrap the edges, that's totally up to you. So now that I have this temporarily attached here, I'm just going to flip it over and cut that angle at the top. So now there's piece H cut to size. So for wall I, the decorative paper gets cut the same size as the wall, and the openings get cut out. So I've put some temporary adhesive on here on the front side, and I'll just line up my paper with the edges, and then I can flip it over, cut the edges even, and then cut out the openings. So here's wall I with its 2 openings cut out. So for wall J, we're going to do something a little different. We want the paper to be 8 inches tall, and we also want it to be a 1/2 inch wider than the wall chipboard is. So since the wall is 2 3/4 wide, I'll cut this paper 3 1/4 by the full 8, and then I'll make a score line a 1/2 inch in on the left side. So I have my paper cut at 3 1/4 by 8, and I'm going to temporarily adhere it to wall J, and I want to align the bottom edge and the right edge of the chipboard with the paper. So I have this adhered to my paper, and the only thing I want to cut here are the 2 window openings. So I have my 2 openings cut on piece J, and then I'll go ahead and fold this edge right along here. And now I'm going to do some inking along the edges of these pieces, all 3 of the pieces that we have, and then remove them remove the temporary adhesive, and go ahead and prep them with score tape. We'll eventually attach them permanently here, and we'll put a piece of score tape along this tab as well, but we won't attach anything to the walls at this point. So here are the 3 pieces of decorative paper prepped with score tape on piece wall I. I've added an extra 1/2 inch strip of score tape right underneath the window, and I used 1/2 inch at the bottom. That's because the porches will be attached here, and that's the same thing over here on wall H. I have a piece where the join is, but if you didn't have a join, make sure you put a 1/2 inch piece in there around the 4 1/2 inch mark, because that's where the porch will come in, and I also have a 1/2 inch down here at the bottom. And I added a strip in the middle of wall H because we are not cutting windows openings here, but there are windows that will be attached here, and so just to give them a little more stability. So that's the prep for the decorative paper. Next we'll do a little construction, and I have wall J and I here. J is on the left, and the join goes on the inside between these 2 walls. So right now I have the fronts facing me, so I'm just going to flip this over so that I have the backs. I'm going to make a butt joint here, just butting these 2 together, and then add one of my joining strips to join those 2 pieces. Now on the top edge we want to add a couple of our little ledger strips. These are 1/4 inch, cut 1/4 inch by the length of a piece of chipboard. So here, that's a ledger strip, and in the cutting guide it specifies approximately how many of these you'll need. Now I'm just using plain colored chipboard just so that you can see it a little bit easier. You can of course cut this out of black. So when we put these on, this is my top edge up here. I'm going to hold them back 1/16 of an inch from that edge, and if it's hard for you to judge a 1/16 of an inch, you can just take a spare piece of chipboard and use that and align it right along that edge so that you get that measurement correct. And then For the one that's going on piece J, wall J, you'll want to cut this so that it holds back from the edge a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch. So I'm just going to put this on here. I've done this a lot, so I pretty much can judge that 1/16 of an inch. And then we'll put another piece along the top of a wall I here. And that one can go pretty much edge to edge. You might hold it back just a little bit from the corners, a 1/16 of an inch or so, just so when the walls bend, there's no interference. So now we've got our ledger strips attached at the top. I've decided to put some tracing paper behind the windows, and just to kind of give a little extra texture, hopefully make it looking a little more, I don't know if it'll be creepy looking, but at least it won't look too fresh inside of the windows. So to do that, I'm taking a couple pieces of tracing paper, and I've cut one 3 inches wide that's going to go over here on piece J, and one that's 4 inches wide that's going to go here on piece I. And the first thing I'm going to sew, they're 4 by 7. This one's 4 by 7, this one's 3 by 7. And I'm going to crinkle them up. So just crinkle them in a ball and then roughly smooth them out. So here are my 2 pieces of crinkled up paper, and now I'm just going to use some distress ink on the top of them just to get rid of a little bit of that whiteness, just a light brown. I think I'll use Vintage Photo because I have that out. So I've inked my 2 pieces of tracing paper, and I ended up using Vintage Photo and then just a little bit of black soot as well. And then I think you can see that I've prepped around the inside of my windows, and I'm working on the inside so that I'll be able to attach my pieces of tracing paper down on each side. So I'll go ahead and get those 2 pieces attached. So now I have the tracing paper attached and burnished down. This is what it looks like on the outside. And we're ready to attach it now to our base front. This is the one without a hole cut in it. And we put this piece I and J go flat against your work surface, and this just fits into the corner here, just like so. And piece J should overlap the end here by 1/8 of an inch, and piece I should fit right up onto where the joint, that corner starts right there. So go ahead and attach these 2 joining strips. Now we're ready to attach one of our sets of lights inside of this place. So I've just removed the protective thing, and I switched it on here to make sure it's working. And I just think it's easier to try to arrange these now before it gets attached to the interior box. You can move around a little bit more easily while it's in this position. So I'm just going to kind of unwind this first, and once I get it unwound, I'll be back. So the key here is the top part with the battery pack needs to kind of hang over the front edge somewhat. And then the rest of the lights can be arranged so that they're showing through the windows on the front and on the side. And I've cut a few little, these are just pieces of a joining strip that I've cut, about 1 inch or so long, and just cut apart so that I can anchor them a little bit where I want them inside. So just turn on the lights and check it out, and and see where you want them to go so that they'll be showing through the windows. So here's what my lights look like on the inside. I've just used some of those little pieces of tape to hold them in place. Now you can just stuff them down inside of the unit once it gets put together. If you want to just let the lights kind of go willy-nilly, you don't have to be so you know, controlling about it like I did here. But the key thing is to let the controller come out of the top here. Next, we can take this unit we just assembled and attach it to our interior box. It goes on the side that has the 7 1/4 inch strip. And what we'll do is this edge on piece J will overlap the edge of that box so that it forms a nice flush edge right here. This is flush. So I'll use some glue to put that on. And then down here on the bottom we have a joining strip, and this piece here is sized to fit exactly to the interior box. So run a bead of glue on the edge of wall J and attach it to the interior box, and then put the joining strip in place and let that set up for a few minutes. Now once our glue has set up, we can add a finishing strip here to this corner, and a finishing strip is basically the same as a joining strip. It's cut 3/4 inch wide, scored down the center at 3/8 with 1/4 inch score tape on it. The difference is that the score tape is on the inside, so we can make a nice finish of this corner right here. So cut this to the 7 3/4 length and then just install it so that it makes a nice square corner here on this join between I and J. Now at this point, the only piece of decorative paper we're going to put on is the piece that goes on wall J. This is the one that has the scoring at a 1/2 inch, and now I think you can see why, so that it can, that scored edge fits inside of the box here like so. And we want to keep the bottom edge flush so that this top edge up here is overhanging by about 1/4 inch. And you should see about a 1/16 inch reveal of black along this edge here. And your window openings, since you cut them with that piece, should all align. So go ahead and install this piece of decorative paper onto wall J. And the way I like to do this is to install this strip first here on the inside, so this piece still has its backing on it. And once that piece is installed, I know I have it nice and stable, and I can remove the score tape backing on this side and go ahead and get it installed. Now once we have the paper on this end, we'll flip the unit over, and wall H fits exactly aligned with the bottom here on the interior box, and it's the same width as the interior box. So just go ahead and glue that to the side of the box all the way up there. So now we have a unit that looks like this, and we're not going to attach these other two pieces of decorative paper yet, so just put them inside here so they don't get misplaced, and set this unit aside for a few minutes.